Tape comes in a variety of standard formats and track configurations, in both professional and semi-pro configurations. There are three aspects to this: the number of tracks, the width of the tracks, and the width of the tape. Track counts range from 1, mono, up to 24, and in a few cases even more. Track widths range from full track to half track to quarter track, and tape widths range from quarter inch to 2 inch for open reel, with even narrower 1/8 inch tape used in cassettes. The earliest recorders were mono, utilizing quarter inch tape, with one track occupying the entire useful width of the tape. The track width used for this format is called full track. Professional stereo recorders implemented 2 tracks in that same quarter inch width. This track width is the half track format, and that's still the basic standard for stereo tape recorders, though later on 2-track machines that use half-inch tape were, and sometimes still are, used for high-end stereo mixing and mastering applications. For a while during the 60s, recorder makers like Ampex fit 3 tracks into half-inch tape. These were used on early Motown hits, among others, and they and other manufacturers soon squeezed 4 tracks into half-inch tape. 4 tracks on half-inch tape utilizes a track width that's very slightly narrower than the quarter-inch half-track stereo format. Studer's J37 4-track recorder upped the tape width to 1 inch. 4 tracks on 1-inch tape utilized the same track width as quarter-inch full track. The J37 was the machine used to record the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, bouncing between 2 machines via the sound-on-sound recording technique to build up complex multi-track arrangements. In short order, tape counts went to 8-track on 1-inch tape and 16-track on 2-inch tape. The Ampex MM1000 is a classic example of an early 2-inch 16-track multitrack. Both of these formats use the same track width as half-inch 4-track. Eventually, the industry settled on a format that fit 24 tracks onto 2-inch tape. 24 tracks on 2-inch tape uses a narrower track width. In fact, it's the same width more or less as was later used in semi-pro multitracks, but a somewhat wider gap between tracks helped maintain pro-level performance and sufficient freedom from crosstalk between adjacent tracks. That, plus faster tape speeds, like 30 IPS, gave the 2-inch 24-track format fully professional specs, and it became the gold standard for multi-track recording for the next 20 years or so. Over the years, there were a few attempts at increasing the track count. 3-inch tape was tried but abandoned due to logistical problems. Some 2-inch 32-track recorders were made, and one company, Stevens, even made a 2-inch 40-track recorder that was used on some albums in the 80s. But the lack of standardization probably doomed these experimental formats, and eventually, mechanical synchronization technology utilizing timecode signals printed on one track enabled 2 24-track machines to be mechanically synced together reliably for 48-track recording. This development effectively ended any efforts to increase the track count of individual analog recorders, and 48-track recording became commonplace in larger studios. In a parallel track, multi-track recorders intended for the semi-pro market kept prices down by utilizing narrower tape widths and track widths. The TEAC 3340 quarter-inch 4-track, released in the 70s, was a milestone in the development of affordable multitracks. The track width of 4 tracks on quarter-inch tape is referred to as the quarter-track format. It utilized a slightly narrower track width than the 24 tracks on 2-inch tape, with less of a gap between tracks and maximum tape speeds of 15 IPS, so the spec was a little less professional, but it was capable of excellent performance nonetheless. Now, 4 tracks on quarter-inch tape was already a common format for consumer stereo tape recorders, but in that case the tracks were recorded so as to create a side A and side B, doubling the recording time. 2 tracks were recorded in one direction, and then the tape was flipped over, and the other 2 were recorded in the opposite direction. But since the 3340 was intended for multi-track recording, its 4 tracks were recorded in the same direction for true 4-track recording, and it included the sync monitoring capability needed for overdubbing. The semi-pro industry graduated to 8 and 16-track recorders, each utilizing the same quarter-track track width on tape that was, in each case, half the width of the tape used for the corresponding track count in professional machines. So 8 tracks on half-inch tape and 16 tracks on 1-inch tape. Fostex even offered budget machines that squeezed 8 tracks onto quarter-inch tape and 16 tracks onto half-inch tape. Despite the lower specs, with careful recording technique, these machines were still capable of making decent multi-track recordings, and were even used to record some commercial releases. For consumer distribution of music, another tape format caught the fancy of music lovers: the compact cassette. Instead of open reels, the diminutive stereo cassette, which could fit in a shirt pocket, squeezed 4 tracks in the side A, side B format onto 1/8-inch tape, running at a speed of 1 7/8 IPS. Naturally, the narrow tracks and slow speed made for a relatively noisy, lo-fi sound quality, but, as happened more recently with the similarly lo-fi MP3 format, the convenience factor won out and the cassette became widely popular, rivaling and even exceeding vinyl as the preferred consumer format, until recordable CDs eventually killed it. The cassette format was also a big part of the home project studio revolution. 4-track multi-track cassette players, like the popular Portastudio from TEAC, were a big part of the revolution that brought multi-track recording to the masses. Despite their relatively lo-fi sound quality, they offered a cheap and convenient format for musicians and songwriters to work out songs and arrangement ideas, much like GarageBand and similar software and apps do today. Next up, a very brief look at some of the common brands and formulations of tape.